Hello, thanks for watching this video. My name is Ray Harris. I'm the Spiritual Care Coordinator for Tabor Village, and it's an honor to be able to spend these few moments with you, taking your time or you investing your time on this important topic of grief. I've called this talk, Am I Grieving? A question that we sometimes say, well, what am I experiencing? Why am I feeling this way? Am I grieving? Simply put, grief is acknowledging that we have experienced a loss, and that loss, whether it's of a loved one, of a situation, of a relationship, whatever it might be, we grieve that loss. And grieve is an emotional response because we cared, because there was an investment, and we've lost that relationship. At Tabor Home in particular, we've had a very difficult season. Starting in November, we lost many people who died with COVID, from COVID. In fact, we had over 29 people who died with COVID, and more who died from natural causes. It's been a difficult season, a difficult time, and we as a Tabor community have tried in different ways to encourage one another during this time, because we are all at different levels and in different ways grieving the loss of those who have died. We say in our mission statement that Tabor is a place where we care from the heart. Well, because we do, and as we do, we invest our emotions in the people we serve. So whatever your role, whether you're one of the nursing staff or care aides or housekeeping or food services or maintenance, all the different dimensions of our community, we care. And as we invest time and energy and love into people and they die, it's difficult. Even more so and exacerbated and intensified during this past 6 months or year 2020, 2021. And so I'm creating this little video as a way of us looking at, and you looking personally at, am I grieving? Am I feeling this way, whatever way? And I'll describe some of the emotions and the reactions we have in a moment because of grief. A good question for us to ask. The Mayo Clinic definition of grief is this statement: grief is a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion. It goes on to describe that and state that grief is a natural reaction to loss. Sometimes when we have some of these emotions and feelings of grief, then we say, is this natural? Is this normal? Or do other people feel this? Or it's just, am I the only one? It's a natural response, again, because we've lost something of great significance in our life. In this case, here at Tabor, we've lost loved ones, people that we have come to care for. And it's also intensified by the fact that now we're in a season where we're welcoming new residents into our home. And so we're hardly over the grief from the loss, and now we're moving into needing to care and welcome and be positive with new residents. It's a challenge. Mayo Clinic continues in looking at the theme of grief by saying it's a universal and a personal reality. It's an experience that is universally shared across cultures, across and around the world, and throughout time. And it is also deeply personal. Everyone grieves differently and in their own way. Mayo Clinic definition continues by saying grieving people cannot control the process. And so we need to be prepared for varying aspects or phases, sometimes stages of grief. And so how do we understand grief? How do we come to understand our grief? A good way to start is by talking to someone. Just expressing how you're feeling and asking, is this normal? Can I carry on this way. I've talked to some people, some of our staff, and they say, I'm actually okay, I'm feeling okay, and they sort of dismiss it. But talking to others, and then giving time to actually listen and process what we're feeling. Another way is to try to address, at least identify some of the areas that might be intensifying our grief and that cause more significant emotional pain for us. Some of these areas can be feelings of guilt. I should have done such and such. I could have done more. Feelings of guilt that the person died partly or in part because of something we did or did not do. We can feel regret. Regret at things we did not do, did not say, did not express. We can feel anger, which is a volatile and powerful emotion. We can be angry at God. We can be angry at death, angry at the situation, angry at the virus that has taken these people. And sometimes we go to blame, blaming ourselves, blaming others, blaming leadership, blaming the government, blaming God. All of these aspects intensify and make grief complicated. It's true whether it's at the workplace, a place like Tabor, or if it's in our own personal family. Those emotions are often there in varying degrees and in varying ways. Anger, guilt, regret, blame. We sometimes refer to the stages of grief, and this is based on a theory that was developed and codified, you could say, about 3 decades ago, the Kubler-Ross method or stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her studies collated some of the different common reactions to grief and created a kind of a paradigm that helps to express or experience and understand some of the things that happen during grief. She later in life said, there were weaknesses in the program and in the theory, and some have dismissed it altogether, but I do think it has some helpful language for us and helpful thoughts for us as we process grief, as we answer the question, am I grieving? And so many of you will be familiar with the 5 stages of grief. I'm going to name them and then describe them a little bit more detail. First, there's denial. Secondly, there's anger. Then bargaining. Then depression. Then acceptance. The weakness in the program is the way I use that word then, as if it's a sequential, orderly, logical process, and it is not. Grief is random, and as I said earlier, it's individual, it's personal. So these stages or these descriptors are helpful. They give us vocabulary, they give us a way of understanding, but to think of it as some kind of a logical process or a list that we check off and say, well, there, now I've dealt with denial, so I can move on. It circles back and catches us again in different ways, and so it's not in a sequence, and it's not simple. But it is helpful, and so let's look at them. First of all, denial, I think all of us have experienced, especially when we have lost someone close to us. A sense of disbelief. This can't have happened. It's surreal. It seems unbelievable. And then moving quickly into, no, it can't be. I know they're going to come back. And so that denial, it works itself out, sometimes expresses itself in the workplace, especially frontline caregivers, in the sense of saying, I'm a professional. I've dealt with this before. I know people die. They come here to live until they die, and I'm okay with it. And I've had conversations with people that way, and I think they honestly believe that. But that is a form of denial. Sometimes it's a cry for help, and they say, I don't need help. When any of us say that, I don't need help, that's usually a sign that, yeah, probably we do. Denial. Anger. An odd one when you think of it, because we're talking about love, we're talking about care, compassion, And anger, how does that fit in? Well, anger is a reaction, very human, very common for all of us in different things. It may not even be anger as in a rage, but it can be irritation. It can be irritability. It can be annoyance over little things that don't even matter. And you might find yourself in the workplace saying, well, don't do it that way, or you need to take care of this first, or whatever the situation is, and afterwards you might even say to yourself, why did I overreact? Well, that's that part of grief that is reflected in the irritability of a normal workplace. We don't have the luxury at Tabor and other care homes of giving ourselves weeks and weeks of time to recover as we do with other grief that we have. If we've lost a parent or lost a sibling or a spouse, we give ourselves time to grieve, and we need to. But often in the workplace, we have to return within time, maybe just the next shift, and so we haven't had time to process our grief. Bargaining, what is that about? Well, sometimes people will say, if I only do this, if I can do this, if I do this, God, will you bring them back? Now it's different in the workplace where we work, because we know we work with elderly people, frail people who are on the journey of dying. So we know that we wouldn't want to bring them back in many cases, because we know that they were in difficult situation and difficult reality. But in other areas of our life, that idea of bargaining or bartering, trying to make deals, if only this could happen, could they come back? Could we have that relationship restored? Grief doesn't always lead to it, but sometimes can lead to depression. And depression, of course, is a clinical condition, needing to be treated, needing to be addressed if it's serious and prolonged. It can lead to that, but it can also just be a sense of apathy, a sense of a lack of energy, lack of drive. The job you maybe once loved doing has now become a chore. Or you loved spending time walking with your family, and now you just can't be bothered. And then the Kubler-Ross theory says we move then into acceptance. Well, that looks different for every individual. And what does that look like? And we keep refreshing and reflecting on the reality of grief. But we do come to a point where the pain lessens. And we do come to a point where we have a different, broader context. I'd like to close this session by giving an example from the Bible, because I am a chaplain and I come at this reality of grief from a Christian perspective. It's actually an account of how Jesus responded to the death of a dear friend. His name was Lazarus. It's recorded for us in the Bible in John chapter 11. When Jesus saw the people who were grieving, who were weeping at the tomb, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have they laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. 3 things to draw from this little vignette, this little scene where he was at the graveside, the tomb of his dear friend who had died. He saw others weeping and grieving, and the word here says he was deeply moved. It actually can mean angry. He was angry. He was agitated. You might say he was furious. With what? With the people grieving? No, with death. Death was not to be, and he was angry. He was troubled. And then the second thing, they led him to where he was. He looked at the scene. He evaluated what was happening. He probably even evaluated his own personal reaction to the situation. And then the shortest verse in the Bible, 2 words, Jesus wept. We see Jesus, the teacher, the Lord, the Savior, crying at the tomb of a loved one. And it's okay for us as well to express our grief in a variety of ways. Thank you for joining me for this time of looking into the question, am I grieving?